What happens when two of television's most beloved personalities turn a lighthearted interview into the most explosive moment in late-night history? The Tonight Show stage, usually filled with laughter and applause, became ground zero for a confrontation that would end a legendary career and leave millions of viewers stunned. This isn't about a publicity stunt or a scripted bit gone wrong. This is about what really happened when Kelly Clarkson sat down across from Jimmy Fallon, and a simple question sparked a chain reaction nobody saw coming. The studio audience was electric that night, packed wall to wall with fans who had waited months for tickets. Kelly Clarkson walked onto the Tonight Show set with her familiar warmth, waving as the crowd erupted in cheers. This wasn't her first time there. She and Jimmy Fallon had always shared easy chemistry, the kind that made interviews feel more like conversations between old friends. They hugged, she took her seat, and Jimmy launched straight into his usual playful banter. Compliments flew, laughter followed, and the audience relaxed into what felt like another classic Tonight Show moment. They talked about Kelly's music, her kids, funny behind-the-scenes stories from her own show. Every beat landed. The band chimed in at just the right moments. Everything was smooth, polished, comfortable. Exactly what millions of viewers expected from two of the most likable faces on television. Then Jimmy shifted. His tone changed just enough to be noticeable. He started talking about talk shows, about the industry, about daytime versus late night. At first, it sounded harmless, even flattering. He praised Kelly's success, mentioned how well her show was doing, how often her name was in the headlines. Kelly smiled, but there was a flicker of confusion in her eyes, like she was trying to figure out where this was going. Jimmy pressed on, bringing up comparisons, competition, ratings. Kelly answered carefully, insisting she didn't see it as beating anyone, that there was room for everyone. The audience sensed it too, that subtle shift in energy when laughter fades and curiosity takes its place. Jimmy leaned further into the topic, drawing a line between daytime and late night, between casual television and what he called tradition and legacy. The room went quiet. Kelly sat up straighter. Her smile tightened. One word hung in the air heavier than anyone expected: lighter. In that moment, what had been friendly banter crossed into something else entirely. The audience felt it. The band felt it. And Kelly felt it most of all. The question wasn't whether the interview had gone off the rails. It was whether either of them could steer it back before everything exploded. Kelly repeated Jimmy's words slowly, as if testing them out loud. Casual, lighter, different lane. Each phrase landed harder than the last. Jimmy tried to soften it, explaining formats, audiences, traditions. But the more he talked, the worse it sounded. What he meant as context came across as hierarchy. And Kelly wasn't having it. She challenged him directly, asking if he truly believed her work was somehow less valuable than his. Jimmy laughed nervously, glancing at the audience for relief, but none came. The room had gone still, every person aware they were watching something unscripted, something real. Kelly pointed out exactly what he was doing, accusing him of diminishing what she'd built and hiding it behind compliments. Jimmy denied being threatened, but Kelly pushed back harder, asking why the distinction mattered so much if it meant nothing. When he insisted that late night was where real conversations happened, the tension snapped. Kelly listed what her show actually represented: daily work, real stories, vulnerability, connection. She spoke about crying with her audience, laughing with them, sharing moments that mattered, not as a defense, but as a declaration. Jimmy tried to regain control, insisting he respected her, insisting she was overreacting. But the more he talked, the clearer it became that he was losing ground. Kelly accused him of trying to establish a hierarchy with himself on top. When he hesitated, when his confidence cracked, the audience felt it. This wasn't a host guiding a conversation anymore. This was a man being confronted on his own stage. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jimmy suggested Kelly had gotten lucky, that timing played a bigger role than talent. The words landed like a slap. Kelly stood up immediately. The sound of her chair scraping the floor echoed through the studio. She refused to let him rewrite her story. She spoke about her career, about winning competitions, building success piece by piece, earning every opportunity she'd been given. Jimmy backtracked, but it was too late. Kelly called out the real issue: fear. Fear of changing audiences, slipping ratings, a shifting industry. She named the insecurity he hadn't been willing to admit. When she brought up numbers, when she pointed out her growth alongside his decline. The confrontation turned brutal. Now they were both standing, facing each other across the desk. No jokes, no laughter, just two people defending their worth in front of millions. And everyone watching knew there was no easy way out of what had just been unleashed. Jimmy tried to reframe the argument, talking about pressure, legacy, the weight of carrying a late-night institution. He spoke about the exhaustion of having to be on every night, of making people laugh no matter what was happening behind the scenes. For a moment, it almost worked. The room softened. Almost. Kelly acknowledged the pressure but refused to accept it as an excuse. She made it clear that she understood the grind, that she lived it daily, and that tradition didn't give anyone the right to look down on others. She accused Jimmy of lifting himself up by pushing her down, and the words cut deep. The audience sat in total silence, watching what felt less like an argument and more like a reckoning. Jimmy tried to reset, suggesting they both take a breath, that things had gotten out of hand. Kelly corrected him immediately. This hadn't gotten out of hand. This had gotten real. She challenged the persona Jimmy had built, calling out the safety, the likability, the avoidance of conflict. She said it worked until someone refused to play along. Jimmy bristled, raising his voice, insisting she didn't know him. Kelly calmly replied that she knew exactly what she was seeing. A man who started a conversation to assert control and couldn't handle resistance. When Kelly framed the issue as one of respect, especially toward women in the industry, the tension shifted again. Jimmy pushed back, claiming she was twisting it, but Kelly stood firm. She told him plainly that she didn't need his platform or approval, that she had walked away from bigger things than this. She gave him a choice: talk as equals or watch her leave. For the first time, Jimmy cracked. Not defensively, but emotionally. He admitted, quietly, that he didn't know what he'd been trying to do. That admission stunned the room. The audience felt the shift immediately. The anger drained, replaced by vulnerability. Jimmy finally apologized, admitting he'd been dismissive and condescending. The words echoed through the studio, heavy and unexpected. Kelly accepted the apology cautiously, but pressed further. She needed to know whether he regretted the words or the beliefs behind them. That question hit harder than any accusation. Jimmy looked exhausted, like a man suddenly aware of how much he'd been carrying and how outdated some of it had become. He admitted that he'd been taught to believe late night was the pinnacle. That part of him still clung to that idea, even as he knew the world had changed. The honesty was raw, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. Kelly listened without interrupting, her anger giving way to something quieter. When Jimmy admitted he wanted to believe he was better, not because it was true, but because he needed it to be, the studio felt heavier than ever. He confessed that equality scared him, that if different paths led to the same success, it forced him to question the sacrifices he'd made and the rules he'd lived by. Kelly didn't gloat. She didn't attack. She told him he was human, that everyone wants their struggle to mean something. She explained that her success didn't erase his, that different paths didn't invalidate each other. When Jimmy questioned what made late night special if it wasn't superior, Kelly answered simply, the work, the connection, the honesty, not the time slot, not the legacy. Jimmy fell silent, staring at his desk like it might offer answers he didn't have. When he admitted he wasn't sure he believed in that anymore, a chill swept through the room. This wasn't just about one interview or one argument. It was about identity, relevance, and fear of being left behind. Kelly leaned forward, asking what he meant. Jimmy began to explain how long he'd felt like he was going through the motions, holding on to a version of success that no longer fit the world he was in. The admission wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet and devastating. The audience, the band, the crew all watched as the confrontation transformed into something deeply personal. There was no winner here. No viral one-liner that neatly wrapped things up. Just two people facing uncomfortable truths on live television. When the segment finally ended, it didn't feel like an ending at all. There was no applause cue, no triumphant music, just a lingering sense that something fundamental had shifted. Viewers at home would debate it for weeks. Headlines would frame it as a clash, a meltdown, a moment of chaos. But for those who watched closely, it was something else entirely. It was a public unmasking, a reminder that behind the smiles, the jokes, and the polished sets are real insecurities, real fears, and real stakes. That night on The Tonight Show didn't just expose tension between two stars. It exposed an industry in transition and the cost of holding on to old hierarchies in a world that no longer believes in them. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, one truth remained impossible to ignore. Television had changed forever, and so had the people who built it.